Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. So today we're going to be building a drawing app from scratch, and this has been inspired by an app called Excalidraw, which is the one that we can see here. So Excalidraw is a virtual whiteboard app, and it's got this hand sketched feel to it, which is really nice. So you can kind of select different items, free markers, etc., and you can basically draw out. It's sort of an unlimited whiteboard as well. And you can of course change styles, backgrounds, etc. And it's got a few other features like collaboration with other people. It's end-to-end encrypted, translated, etc. So there's quite a few things going on. And this is all open source. So I thought it'd be cool to try build a kind of a very simple version of Excalidraw from scratch, just to see how it works. Sometimes looking at the actual open source project can be quite intimidating. So I thought we could break it down and just do it from scratch in a simple way. So this is what we're going to be building today. Not quite as nice as Excalidraw, but we have either lines, which we can kind of, you can see, and rectangles. So you can kind of click and draw those. So very, very minimal drawing app, but you can see how, hopefully by building this, how it starts to build up into something like Excalidraw. So there's probably 2 or 3 prerequisites that is probably worth knowing before kind of diving into this, and that's a bit about HTML canvas, which MDN have got some quite good documentation tutorials, but basically HTML exposes a canvas element which you can use, and through using some JavaScript and getting references to the canvas and then the context, you can start drawing elements on that canvas, such as, we've got the rectangle here, which we'll kind of see later on, and you can draw lines and you can draw circles or even SVGs, etc. So might be worth reading up a bit about the documentation there. And the second thing is something called Rough.js. So Rough.js is built on top of HTML canvas, but it gives you the kind of hand drawn look and feel that we're after, and it's got a similar API. You can see here that we're drawing a rectangle with XY coordinates, width and height, etc. So it's worth looking into this. Specifically, if you go into the API and you look for the generator, just a slightly different way to do it. So it's exactly the same API where rectangles, lines, etc. But we're generating them, storing them into a variable, and then we're drawing them at a later date. So worth looking over those two. And the third and final thing worth mentioning is the grid system, which is very similar to SVG if you're familiar with it, but it's 0, 0 at the top left, X and Y on the horizontal and vertical axis, and then as you go on, you can see if I'm drawing a point from here to here, we can see that it's 10, 10 across all the way down to 100, 100. That's basically the grid system. That's how it works. And so let's get started. So we're going to start with this Hello World app. We've got absolutely nothing to start with, and the first thing we're going to do is just going to add a canvas. So let's start with that. For a canvas, we can give it an ID of canvas, and we'll just say canvas here. So it doesn't need to have anything inside it, but if the browsers don't support, they can fall back to the text inside. And just for the meantime, what we're going to do is I'm just going to give it a background color just so we can see it for a moment. Let's give it a background color blue. Cool. And we can start, and we can see this blue thing at the top left. 300 by 50. So that's the default width and height. So we just want it full screen. So we can do that by just specifying the width and height on it. Simple as that. What we want is we want the full screen of the kind of the visible part of the browser, not the entire browser, right? So just what we see in here, and we can get that by doing window.inner width, right? So outer width would give us the full browser, inner width gives us just the window we see. So height, exactly the same thing, dot inner height. Let's do that, and there we go. So that's the full thing there. And then we can just take away the color, so we can just assume that it's all there. Perfect. So we've got the canvas started, and let's just take the example from, I guess, MDN's website, just so we can see it drawn. Perfect. So what we're going to do here in React, I'm going to use the use layout effect hook here. And I'm specifically using this one because I think it's the right one to use when it comes to manipulating DOM elements. So you want the DOM to be completely ready before you do anything. So I think that's the right one. So I've just pasted it, and you can see the green element. So again, we're getting the canvas by the ID here. So that's the same ID here, and we're getting that from the document. Then we're specifically asking for the context, and this is the rendering context. So this is just a standard thing that you do, pass in 2D. There's other options like 3D, etc. that we're not going to use. I don't actually think it's 3D, it's WebGL or something. But so we're calling the context, and then we're using the context to start filling out some elements, right? And that's, yeah, simple as that. So we can, I think, also do ctx.stroke rect. Let's do it 200 for 100. So we can see, yeah, there's a rectangle in the middle. Perfect. So I'm going to get rid of this, and we're going to keep the rest of that here for now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to import, and I've already done this, but what you want to do is npm import, npm install rough.js, because we want to do the exact same, but we're going to do it with rough.js. So once you've imported that, installed that, sorry, we can go ahead and import rough from rough.js, and I think they have some, yeah, bundled version there. So we take rough, and from the API that we saw, we can do rough canvas is equal to rough.canvas. So we're initializing it, and we're passing in the existing canvas that we have. Cool. And then we can do exactly the same thing. So rough canvas dot rectangle, let's do 10, 10, 100, 100. Save that, and we can see that's drawn it there. Perfect. And the final thing we're going to do before we get kind of into the actual drawing aspect is use the generator that we've seen. So we've got generator from rough.generator. Oops. Generator. And then we can basically replace this with generator. So that's generating the rectangle. So this const rect is equal to that. And then we can rough canvas.draw. Now, the benefit of this, of course, is we can draw any shape in here, so we don't need to kind of have all this logic to check which one it is, but that'll be extracted out elsewhere. And if we do that, we're going to get the exact same effect. And you may have noticed the slight change there. So every time we refresh this, because it's a hand-drawn look, it's going to be slightly different. So actually, let's add also a line just to see what that looks like. Line 10, 10, and this actually, instead of width and height, it's y1, y2, so I'm going to do 110, 110, and then we're going to draw the line as well. Cool, so that's fine. So we've got the line and rectangle, but we don't want them to appear there from the start. We want to draw them instead, right? So what does that mean? We need to basically track the mouse events, the mouse movements, right? So we want, hey, when we click, we want to create, let's start with the line, right? So when we click, we want to create this line, and the X and Y are going to be at the point of the cursor. So let's say here, if I click down, that's going to be 10, 10. And actually the end coordinates, X2 and Y2, are also going to be 10, 10, right? And then as I'm moving my mouse and I'm still clicked down, the X2 and Y2 are going to be moving with me, right? So I should be seeing a line that started off at 10, 10, and then the end coordinates are just going to keep updating as I move my mouse, right? And then at some point, whenever I let go, it's going to stop updating, and the line should basically stay there, right? So if we think about that for a moment, we know we're going to have to keep a track of the elements, right? So the actual element itself. We know that we're going to have to create the element as soon as we click, and we need to update it as we move. And then, yeah, when we let go of the click on mouse up, we're not doing anything. So let's take those and add them in. So first thing I'll do is actually, I know that we're going to have to keep track of some sort of elements. So I'll do elements here. And that's going to start off as an empty array. Perfect. Next thing I want to do is I need the concept of whether I'm drawing or not. So as we said, we can track the on move, but we don't want to track the move all the time. We only want to track it while we're drawing. And we're only drawing while the mouse is down, right? So let's have a state for drawing, set drawing, and this is going to be false to start off with, and I think that should be enough to get us started, right? So we're going to go to the canvas and we're going to add some events. So when we click down on the mouse, I'm going to go to the console here. When we click down on the mouse, all we want to say is we want to set drawing to true for now. Perfect. And as we move, we want to track the X and Y coordinates. So let's just say if we're not drawing, then just return. Don't really care. Otherwise, for now, let's just console.log X and Y. So client X and client Y is what they're called from event, right? So that's basically your mouse coordinates, and that's so worth noting that that's the mouse coordinates relative to the window size. So if your canvas is not the same size as your window, you're gonna have to play around with offsets, etc. But we're not going to get into that now because it's the same width. We can keep that simple. And as soon as we let go, we can set drawing to false because we're no longer drawing. So what we should see now, I mess up to be a function. Yes, cool. So what we should see now is nothing as I move my mouse around. As soon as I click down, yeah, you can see that the coordinates at the bottom there are showing. As soon as I click my mouse up, nothing anymore. Cool. And actually, another thing that you may have noticed is this is getting a lot darker, right? Every time I click, that's getting a bit darker. And the simple reason for that is this is being re-rendered every time. So it's redrawing the line and the rectangle on top of each other, and it just keeps going on top of that canvas. So what we actually want to do is we want to make sure we clear the canvas every time we re-render, right? So clear it, then redraw every single item. And we can do that by, I'm going to call this context. We can do that by doing context.clear, I think it's clear rect, yeah. Basically creating a rectangle. We're going to start off at 0, 0, and we want to clear the full width and the full height. We can get access to those from the canvas variable. So there we go. And now as I click, it changes, which is fine, but it's not re-rendering. That's perfect. Cool. So now we've got this. What we want to do is we want to actually start creating these elements, right? So let's say in the handle mouse down, as soon as we start drawing, we want to create an element. So I want to create an element. And that's just going to return an element. And what does an element take in? We're going to need an X and Y coordinate to start off with. And we're also going to need the X2 and Y2. So let's just pop them in. So we know that the starting point is going to be client X, client Y. So we can just pop them in like that. And in fact, when we first create the element, the endpoint is actually going to be the exact same, right? So when I click here, 1010, it's going to start at 1010, it's going to finish at 1010 at that point in time, right? And then we're going to continue to update it as we move along, right? So I'm going to create this function here, pop that into the global state, and right now, let's do x1, y1, x2, y2, and the element, all it is right now is x1, y1, x2, y2. That's fine. So we're going to keep those coordinates, and in fact, we also want to create the actual rough JS element as well, and we want to store that because that's what we're going to render later on, right? So let's call that rough element is equal to rough. Let's do generator dot line. So same as down here, and yeah, that's just basically this x1, y1, x2, y2, and we're just going to save the rough element as well, right? So we've created the element, we've created the rough JS element, which has got its own properties, etc. And then we've just kept the x and y coordinates so that we can track them and use them easily. So once we create them, all we need to do is add it to the elements. So set elements, we're going to take the previous state, we're going to add that to a new array, and then we're going to add this element that we just create. So we're just basically pushing elements into the array. That's fine. So if we have a quick look at the components here, so if we look at app, and we look at the state here, so it's empty. As soon as I click here, yeah, we can see that we've got first item and it's got X, Y coordinates, and then it's got the rough element there, which we don't need to look into right now. Cool. So that's fine. Now what we want to do is we want to update it as we move around. So we've got the handle mouse move, and this gives us basically X2 and Y2. So what we want to say is, let's create an element. We somehow need to get X1 and Y1. So we'll deal with that in a moment. But we know that client X and client Y is the new end coordinates, right? And what we can do is we know that the last element in the elements array, so we've just created the element, the last element in the elements array is going to have these details. So what we can do here is index elements dot length -1. So we're getting the index of the last element in the array, and then we can just get x1 and y1 from elements index. So we're taking the last element that we added, which is the one we're still working with. So we've just clicked down, we just created this element, and now we're moving the mouse and we're taking that element, and we're going to take the x and y, so they stay the same. We don't want to change them, but we do want to change the end x and y coordinates. And yeah, and that's actually fine, because inside here it's also going to then recreate the rough element. That's fine. And then basically what we need to do now is just update the array with this new element instead of the previous element. So we can do that by, and what I'll do is I'll just copy this bit of code here. So what we're doing here, yeah, that's a good point. So I've renamed this to update element just to kind of explicitly state that that's the update element. So we're making a copy of the existing element just by popping that in brackets. We're taking the index of the last element and we're basically replacing it with the updated element, and then we're just updating the elements array. So now what we need to do, we've done that, and the element should be creating. So let's just but we're not actually rendering the elements that we created. So instead of rendering these guys here, what we want to do is we want to go through all the elements for each element, and we want to draw basically that element. And that element actually takes in element, a rough element, which you can do. And in fact, we can just destructure this directly, just like that. So we're taking the rough element from each element and we're going to draw it. Simple as that. And it will continue to render as we move along. There's one last thing I've got to do, which is in this use layout effect, we want this to depend on elements. So every time elements is being updated, we want to make sure we re-render the elements in the canvas. So if I go here, we click down, as we move around, it's going to keep re-rendering it. And you can see that's a bit kind of fuzzy there. That's because it's re-rendering a new hand-drawn element each time. But as soon as I let go, that won't change. Another one will. Cool. So now we can draw a few lines. Perfect. And that's pretty much the bulk of the code. The really cool thing here is, because we've kind of hidden away this create element, if we want to draw a rectangle, we can just replace this with rectangle. And of course, instead of x, y coordinates at the end, this one takes in the width, so we just need to do x2 minus x1 and y2 minus y1. And all of a sudden, we're drawing rectangles. So you can kind of see how you can start to build up all the different shapes. So what I'm going to do, just to get to the final bit, is I'm going to copy a bit of code in here. So I'm going to wrap this all around in a div. Let's go down here. So this is all going to be in a div now. And I'm going to paste in another div. And all this does is this is the inputs. So we've just got a couple of radio buttons here, a couple of labels. I've made this position fixed so it just stays at the top left without affecting the size of the canvas. And this is basically going to check for a piece of state called element type. And it's just going to say if it's line, then this is the radio button that's checked. Or if it's a rectangle, this is the radio button that's checked. So it's just going to change a piece of state called element type, which is just going to have a string inside of it. So let's just add that in. So element type and set element type. And that's just going to be, like you said, starting off with line. And the final part is on mouse down, when we create the element, we're going to pass in the element type, right? So we're going to pass that in so it knows, same down here, which one to create. And up here, what we can do is we can basically say if element type is equal to line, then generate a line, and that's going to just be x and y coordinates, just like we had earlier on. And for now, because we know that, I think it's, let's just call this one type, and we're passing it through here. So if type is equal to line, then generate a line, otherwise generate a rectangle. Simple as that. So now when we've got the line clicked, that's going to draw the line. That's exactly what we expect. As soon as we hit rectangle, it's going to be drawn the rectangle. And that's it. So you can see how this starts to build up with different objects. If you want the arrow, if you want the free tools, circles, etc. You start getting into a bit more kind of math. You need a few more equations, etc. to sort out. But the very simple building blocks of drawing elements is there. So if you enjoyed this and you want to dive more into the other elements, or if you want to dive into how RoughJS works, or the peer-to-peer functionality, let me know in the comments below. Happy to do kind of more videos on those, because this was really enjoyable. But yeah, I love how simple this is. That's less than 100 lines of code, and we've built a decent enough drawing app. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next one.